turned on and we'll get started. So this is office hours. I'm going to go through and talk talk a little bit about it. Today. We're going to be looking at invoicing and customizing your invoicing through ProLine using our invoice templates and other settings. So I'm going to go through that. But then at the end, we're going to have time for questions um, and it can be about this or it can be about other aspects of ProLine. Happy to talk about anything. So we'll just look at invoice templates first. So when you're invoicing in ProLine, you're going to go to the billing tab. You're going to go to new invoice, and then you're going to be able to choose one of these templates. Now, these templates are completely customizable to your ProLine account. So they're based on what you've set up for your company. We do have some default ones out of the box, but those can all be customized, changed, added to, all of that. One thing before we get into the actual templates that I just want to point out, and I'll cover how this looks on the template side as well. But there's this difference between we have running balance invoices and we have standalone invoices. Now, this can be a bit of a confusing concept early on, but once you understand it, it makes a ton of sense and it's really useful. But I'll say that generally speaking, you're going to want to stick to one or the other. So if you like the way that running balance invoices work, maybe use that. If you don't, then use the standalone. Standalone invoices are what people typically think of when they think of an invoice. And so for standalone invoices, they're going to ignore all other invoices on the project and they're only going to reflect what's been paid directly towards them. So if you send $1,000 invoice to somebody and then you send a second $1,000 invoice to somebody and there are standalone invoices in ProLine, then you've invoiced $2,000 because you've invoiced 1,000 on one invoice, 1,000 on the other. A payment to that first invoice, so $1,000 payment, does not affect the second invoice. They're completely separate and they're handled separately. The payments to them are handled separately. So that's if you want a normal invoicing experience, like every other platform does it, you can do that. However, we also have this running balance invoicing, which is unique to ProLine as far as I know. And it's a very cool system. So if we're running balance invoices, rather than them stacking. So if you send $1,000 invoice and then you send a second $1,000 invoice, you've actually only invoiced a total of $1,000 because they don't stack on top of each other. The last invoice you sent in the chain for running balance is the most amount of money that you're asking for. And so this gets paired really well with the concept of like an initial deposit. So you can have an initial deposit. We already had one there, so I did not need to do this. Okay, so we have this initial deposit, and we can see here this is an invoice for $16,715.71. But then on this invoice, because it is the deposit, only 5,000 of it is due. So this is something that you can't do with a normal invoicing tool. This requires like a running balance approach. We're telling the homeowner, this gets sent to the homeowner, and the homeowner's being told, hey, you owe $16,715.71 on this project. But today, the only thing that's due is this amount. And then in this case, we're seeing a deposit that's already had a $5,000 payment applied. So this invoice has been paid. So now there's a $0 balance on this invoice, but we're still being very clear with the homeowner that, hey, this isn't everything that you owe us. This is just what you owe us right now. Then we can go back and we can add an invoice typically, and you can have progress payments and stuff like that. But typically, you're going to do like a balance, a deposit, and then after the job, you would send a balance invoice. And so there is no quotes on this. We're just going to copy this. So we'll just make a new item here. Usually, this would be coming over from the quote, so it would have this automatically. But the quotes have been turned on and off on this project, so or deleted and created. So on this running balance invoice, this one is also going to have 16,715, except we're going to have for this one, the full entire amount is due. So rather than just being the 5,000, it's the total amount that's due. And so if we look on here, again, it's still showing this amount. And then the other thing too is if you had change orders or something like that, you can always add that too. So you could have roof replacement, and you could have extra OSB times 3, and you could do, say that's $500, or we'll just say it's $600. I honestly don't know what OSP costs today. Um, So now you've added that on here as well. So this allows you to still change that for the final invoice, but you'll see here it's showing this is the total amount. There's zero confusion on the part of the homeowner because they're saying, yeah, this matches up with what I saw before. This is what we owe. We also signed that if we needed change orders that we were going to pay for that. So that makes sense. So we have the total amount due is the full amount, but then we've already paid the 5,000 because we paid the invoice. So, or paid the deposit. So that shows the deposit and then it shows the remaining balance. So everything's is shown. So it's a little bit confusing on the contractor's end, but on the if you're not used to it, you'll get used to it and then it's fine. But it really makes a ton of sense on the homeowner's end. And so you have a lot less confusion where the homeowner's like, oh, I thought I already paid you. What was that other invoice for? Because you're telling them every single time the full amount that you expect them to pay after the job is completed, and then you're just telling them how much is due at that point in time. And the big thing here is that payment from the $5,000 invoice is being applied towards this balance invoice. So these work together and form a running balance as opposed to the standalone invoices where they would work. So if we did this other template, this would be a standalone invoice. And so I'll just illustrate this. This is how you normally expect or like the way most other platforms do it. So we'll just add in, we'll say this one's 1,500. So we can see here, and it actually shows you the total here, just to clarify. So in standalone invoices, we've invoiced 2,500 because it's 1,000 plus 1,500. But on the running balance side, these don't add up because of the way running balance works. So it's just the max amount that we've billed for, which is in this case the 17,000. So that's the difference between those two. So I want to go ahead and get that out of the way before we talk about templates, just because that does make a big difference. So now we're going to go to company settings and we're going to go to our invoices. And now we can see here our invoice templates. We also have all of our merchant account settings down here as well. So we're going to get to all this here in a moment, but I'm going to start up here in our invoice templates. So we have initial deposit. If we want to change the name, we can just change the name there. Invoice details. So this is the template name. This is internal, but the invoice name is what invoices with this template are going to be named. Usually those are going to be the same, but sometimes they can be different. The memo is just what shows on the customer's end, so that can be edited there. Now, invoice calculation. This is going to be super important because this determines the behavior around that quote or that invoice that you're generating using this template. So here at quote conversion, we can select, do you want to convert projects approved quotes into line items? This is going to allow you to, if this is selected, then when you create quotes with this template, ProLine's going to automatically take whatever was on the quote. So if the customer signed for $15,000 on the quote, then when you go to create an invoice, it's automatically for $15,000. It's going to create that line item automatically. So most of the time, you're going to want to leave that selected. Auto-generate line item descriptions from visible quote line items. So this allows you, so if we turn this on, we can also include quote line item quantities in auto-generated descriptions. So we'll just see what this looks like in totality. Let's get one of these quotes signed. Make sure this has stuff in it. Okay. So I'm so excited for us to have live quotes. Or very, very soon, next week or so, we're gonna have live quotes where you don't have to wait for it to generate. Okay, so it's a $6,000. We'll do the best option. So we'll just sign this so that we have a signed quote. We gotta choose our color. All right, so we have a signed quote now. And then when we go to generate a deposit, so ProLine has automatically pulled over that amount that was agreed to. And then it also created a description for that amount here by default. So it auto-generated this description. So you don't have to have this description auto-generated. You can have that left off. It's just completely up to how you want to invoice and how much information you want on your invoices. So coming back in here to invoices, go to deposit. I'm going to turn that off. Then down here to deduct other invoice payments, this is what's going to determine whether or not it's a running balance invoice, is whether or not other payments get deducted. So if this is selected, then it will be a running balance invoice. If it's deselected, it'll be a standalone invoice. So this is what controls that for all quotes created with this quote template. And then we have amount due. Select how the amount due should be calculated. So there's two different approaches here. One of them is going to be the deposit. So ProLine quotes already have a deposit feature built in. So if we go to here, default quote settings, deposit. So you can set what percentage of the deposit up to a certain amount is part of the quote. So the customer is signing for that deposit amount. And so on the invoice side, you can just automatically pull over that amount due that's been already signed for the deposit, or you can use a percentage. So if it's a balance and it's just for the whole job, then you'd use 100, but you can also do 50% here. But like one setup, if you do progress payments and it's not just two payments or it's more than two payments, so you can have a deposit for the deposit amounts, and then you can have a progress payment for like 75% of the total amount, and then you have the balance for the 100% of the amount. And so those will all work together. We'll kind of work with this balance one here. All right. So send invoice actions. This is what happens when you send an invoice. So you get to pick what stage in ProLine should ProLine move the project to. So usually you're going to have like an invoice sent stage of some kind. And then you can customize the text message and the email that are going to be created to send that invoice. And so this is all customizable how you want these messages to be sent. In addition to that, so if we actually go to send an invoice, so this is these templates are what's being generated from that quote template. But then we can also edit these further. So if we want to edit this before it gets sent out, we can. And so I'm right here, I'm kind of operating more like a member of your team rather than an admin, where I'm about to send this invoice to this specific customer and I can customize the message before I do that. But as an admin in the company settings, you can control what the defaults are. So you can control what is listed here for those messages. So last thing here is the paid invoice actions. So we already send receipts. ProLine automatically sends receipts for payments. So because of that, and it will say like you've completed your invoice in the like the payment received receipt. So that will get that notification's already there, and we control that notification just because there's some kind of legal stuff around like making sure people get their receipt and all that. So we don't allow you to customize those, but we do still allow you to pick what stage the project gets moved to. So this is usually going to be like a paid and closed stage of some kind. This does not happen unless the invoice is completely paid. So if they've only partially paid it, which can happen if they put a partial payment, then this won't occur. So that is the quote or the invoice templates themselves. Let's go through some of our other invoice related settings. So one is going to be your merchant account. Your merchant account is you do have to apply for this and get approved. But once you're approved, then you'll see all of your merchant pricing here and the status of your account. Things can happen that can lead to accounts getting disabled, but it's pretty uncommon. As long as you're doing business the right way, then there's not ever an issue there typically. Payment methods. So this is where you're going to customize how you want to accept payments on these invoices. So here we have everything selected: credit, debit cards, ACH e-check, and physical cash check. So if we go in here to an invoice, and we're going to see that we have this cash check button that pops up with instructions for remitting payment, physical payment. And then we also have the online payments via either credit card or ACH. All right. But we can customize that, and we can also customize those instructions. So whatever instructions that we want to give people. And so a lot of companies, they don't want to mess with physical cash and check, so they'll unselect that. And now there's not that second option, that button for cash check is not going to be there anymore. Only the pay now button. And then some companies, they lean towards one or the other of these two options. They only want to accept credit debit cards because credit debit cards are faster. You'll get the money usually next day with ProLine, the next business day. But ACH e-check can take up to 4 business days. And so because of that, some companies lean one way or the other. But then credit debit cards are definitely have a more expensive fee. So there's that to take into account. It's kind of pros and cons both ways. We typically, I'd say the majority of ProLine companies have all 3 of these selected. And so they'll just have their instructions for physical check cash, and then they'll have their instructions for credit debit and ACH, or they'll have both of these enabled. That way the customer just gets to sort of decide for themselves. And I think that starts to come down with the fees. So usually most ProLine users are passing along card fees to the customer. And so you can let the customer decide, do they want to pay with a debit credit card and cover those fees? Or would they rather do ACH? Typically, because ACH fees are a lot less, typically ProLine customers are not passing on the ACH fees. That way, they're giving their customers an easy way, or a way without fees to pay online. And so it's better than having to worry about a check and going to track down a check. And so most companies are doing that, but some companies also still want to pass along the ACH fees, and that's okay too. So it's up to you and how you want to pass them along. And you have those options. Down here at the bottom, we have some reporting. There's multiple places in ProLine where we report on payments. These reports here are actually coming in directly from our merchant processing partner. So this is sort of a way to double check and you get to see the most up-to-date statuses and stuff for each payment that came in. So you can click on these and get a lot of additional information about what's going on with this payment. And then also you can see each individual deposit. So if you want to know, hey, when is this money getting deposited in my account? You can find that info here. So this is really a backup though. The primary reporting for this is going to be on the cash flow tab of the dashboard. So this is where you're going to see most of the payments reporting. You'll see all your payments here, as well as stuff around quoting and accounts receivable. So this is primary, but there is that backup. We just want to expose as much as possible. So basically this gives every ProLine user the same access to the information about their payments as we have. So you can always reach out to us and we're happy to try to look at it as well, but we basically have the same information. We're just looking at these reports on our end to get the information on like where a payment is. Um, and so that pretty much covers it with invoicing inside of ProLine and how that gets customized. So from here, I'm going to open it up to any questions. Just put it in the Q&A. We have that Q&A at the bottom or the chat. I think the chat should be, yep. So hit me in the chat or in the Q&A with your questions and I will answer those. Let's give it a second well, just go ahead and put your questions in. I'm going to probably, if I see one about invoicing, I'm going to answer that first, but go ahead and just put your questions in. John asks, will there be a recording of this? And the answer is yes, there's a recording. All of our office hours always go out on YouTube. They go under this playlist right here. So, yeah, they usually get batched, so you can see here like three got uploaded here. I think we're overdue to get some uploaded, so this will go out. It's not going to necessarily go out next week, but it will go out on YouTube at some point. John asks, is there a way to manually input a commission amount? No, because commissions are live calculated. You can remove commission if you want here, and then you could put a commission line item down here if you wanted to instead. But we don't have any other way to manually put in. There's no way to put it into this system inside of ProLine because all this is being live calculated. So, but you can do it here. So you could put a line if you wanted to do it that way, you could put in a line item for commission and track it that way. But this is all being live calculated based on the calculation. So you can switch this though. So you can have as many different commission models as you want. So you can have, one for self-generated, one for, company lead. You can have as many different commission models as you want, and then you can select from those models. So you're not locked into whatever default model is selected. So on the make sure we don't have any. Yeah. Inside of manage team is where you have commission tracking or the commission system. So this is where you add it, and then each team member gets a commission, and this is really the default commission, but you can override it on individual projects however you need to. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'll give it one more minute for any questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Gonna go ahead. Live quotes and cover page options. So close, very close. Hoping to have all that by end of week. But possibly might wait a little bit longer just to do some extra testing, but that's all coming very, very soon. All right, we will wrap up there. So thanks everybody for joining.